Chicago Sun-Times newsroom, I'm Natasha Korecki, and this is Off Message, our weekly political talk show. Joining me this week is Dan Mihalopoulos, our watchdog reporter, editorial writer Kate Grossman, and our Springfield bureau chief Dave McKinney. This week we're looking forward to 2014, and I'm asking our guests, our expert panelists, to give us a pitch for what they think is the top story to look for in 2014. Why don't we start with you, Dan? And what's your top choice for the
I think the big question for politics in Chicago, at least, would have to be if a contender emerges who can really seriously challenge Rahm Emanuel's bid for a second term as mayor of Chicago. The election is not until February 2015, but certainly by then we'll know not only who's filed, but who really is a serious candidate. There's an undercurrent of malcontent among especially more left-wing elements, the Chicago Teachers Union and others, who feel that Rahm is not just a centrist that he's always painted himself as, but more of a Republican and Democratic clothing. Is there a Bill de Blasio type character? The new mayor of New York is a Democrat that most of the left has embraced after the many years of Bloomberg. The difference is there's term limits in New York, and that was an open seat.
Well, what do you think? Is there anyone? Is Preckwinkle's name comes up? Can you see her doing it, assuming she retains her seat?
Let's put it this way, I wouldn't rule it out. She probably is the only one who can tap into the undercurrent of discontent, not just among the left, but among African American voters who heavily went for Rahm Emanuel in the absence of a serious African American candidate the first time that he ran for mayor and won.
We'll see what happens with Rahm Emanuel's campaign. Kate, what do you think is one of the biggest political stories that we should look out for next year?
I think the fate of pension reform is going to be a huge story in Chicago and statewide. How it rolls out or doesn't roll out is going to have a huge impact in the city, in municipalities across the state, and in the governor's race. So in the governor's race, you have on the Republican side, Bruce Rauner, who's made his opposition a central theme of his campaign. And so he's going to be hammering that in the primary.
Bruce Rauner, he'll bring the hammer to Springfield.
Because this is Governor Pat Quinn's big moment. To a lesser degree, it's going to be the same thing for Dan Rutherford and Kirk Diller, two other Republican candidates who also voted against pension reform. So Pat Quinn is going to be pushing, to talk about pension reform, but he's also got a couple big things to deal with. One, there's going to be a lawsuit, almost inevitably, and more immediately, that he has to figure out whether he can count on the savings for this coming up fiscal year, and is he going to count that when they're doing the budget. That's going to be, in the news, a big issue, and I'm sure Bruce Rauner will be all over that.
Well, Dave, there's an expected court challenge. Do you expect that's going to happen before the primary?
You know what, I think all signs point toward that, Natasha, because the unions, right now, they're talking about filing something in a matter of weeks and not months or years. A lot of people have talked about them possibly filing in Sangamon County, a venue where there are a lot of state employees, state retirees who could be on a jury.
Well, let's delve right into what you think is the top story for 2014. Speaking of the gubernatorial race, I have a feeling you might be going in that direction.
Yeah, I think it's certainly interesting here. Everybody had written Pat Quinn off as dead, on life support. But he's closing out 2013 on a real roll. Just in the last week, this ADM decision to move to Chicago, of course, the pension issue that Kate was talking about, and of course gay marriage. These things happen really pretty much, bing, bing, bing. I think, they really give him a lot of momentum going into 2014. So I question whether we're going to see sort of a reawakening for him in 2014.
Okay, and with that, I'll throw out the emergence of Bruce Rauner, and we've seen all this money flow into him, not only his own money, but others. And the main thing he's doing is just flooding the airwaves. So he is controlling the message. If we get to a general election and it's a Rauner-Quinn situation, I would think the unions are just going to really come out strong against Rauner.
Well, sure. Out of all the Republican candidates, certainly Bruce Rauner is the least favorite. And that's a generous way to put it, of the unions. And even the unions' disappointment with Quinn for pushing pension reform, he's still going to be their guy.
It's almost as if Pat Quinn's message at that point is, who are you going to vote for? The other guy? Rauner said this pension reform, quote unquote, didn't go far enough. And so I think that he's definitely a scenario for them that looks more like a Chris Christie, Scott Walker situation that we've seen in other states. and that can only work in Governor Quinn's favor.
We'll be looking forward to those big stories next year. And with that, thank you for joining us this week in Off Message, and we will see you next week.